So this is going to be the Capto for coaching, understanding the functionality of the Capto putting sensor. And again, my name is Eric Zeigel. I am the Director of Instruction and the Managing Partner at GLT Golf, Game Live Training Golf. We are the Capto distributor here in the USA, and we are, I also provide all the education for Capto in the US. So if anybody has any questions or if anybody is interested in getting their hands on a Capto, whether it's a demo unit or actually purchasing one, feel free to contact us. My email is right there for you. So azeigel@gltgolf.com. Then my phone number there, that's my cell phone, so feel free to shoot me a text. If you call me and I don't recognize the number, I probably won't answer right away. So feel free to just shoot me a text and we can definitely arrange a call. I also put our social media stuff there. So Capto Golf USA, that's the USA Capto page. Make sure to follow that. Game Like Training, we put a lot of stuff out there on effective practice. We have a YouTube channel, Game Like Training. And on that YouTube channel, we actually have a playlist that is all about Capto. It has Capto hacks, how-tos, and just some insight. I actually did a case study the other week looking at the impact sweet spot and the influence that has on the energy loss. So I went a little bit deeper into that and explained what I did with the student and how we improved this particular student's distance control through understanding the impact sweet spot. So the latest update, I don't know if everybody on this webinar is already using Capto, or if it's just a lot of people that are interested in Capto. But Capto just came out with a new release. This was a couple days ago. So it is the Capto 2019.4 release. Nice thing about Capto, they come out with updates very frequently. So if there are things that you want to see or things that you want improved, whether it's just the functionality of the software or something specific within the software, Capto is awesome about accommodating that and taking those suggestions into consideration. If they think they are valuable, then they go ahead and they will always release those in the latest update. So within the latest update, we had the putter rail, and I'm going to go through all this in a second, but they had the putter rail, the ideal rail in the 3D motion, live mode, the player view in lab mode, the natural loft in the player profile, delta angles, shape quality, loft, lie meter, custom mode, and then we're going to talk about the SweetSpot Plane and Putt Plane. And Dave, that's where we'll get into the conversation of Kernel. So just to give everybody an idea, the putter rail, it gives you the sweet spot in the top shaft position during the stroke, and the ideal rail gives you the ideal trajectory for the sweet spot. We'll talk about those two after we discuss the difference between the SweetSpot Plane and the Putt Plane, because you ultimately have to understand what those two things are before you can understand the ideal versus what the student's currently doing. So let's go ahead and start with the live mode. This is one of the coolest features, in my opinion, that they just came out with. So unfortunately, I can't do this in real time because if I connect to the Capto, I'm going to lose you guys. So I just screen recorded myself messing around with the live mode. And so ultimately, the live mode is it's exactly what it says. While you're connected to Capto, you can actually view the stroke in real time. So if you're working with a player who has face-to-path issues, you can actually have them looking at the screen and getting feedback. You can kind of see here in the middle part where it says closed, open. That's going to give you that face-to-path, relative to the arc. It calculates that arc based on the previous strokes that the player made. Or you can input that data by yourself. So that is an awesome way to help a student, I guess, conceptualize what it is that you're asking them to do, as well as get the feedback on if they're doing it correctly. It's not something where they have to kind of do a drill and then they hit the putt and then they get the feedback. They're actually getting the feedback in real time. So it's another form of instant feedback, which is nice. And you can do that with the lie. So we have the lie piece down here. You can look at, like I said, the face, so face to path, and also gives you shaft as well. So the live mode, definitely something I'll be using a lot. The other one, the loft lie meter, this is another tool. Capto is trying to simplify the calibration process for everybody. And this is a really nice tool that they just came up with. So I'm just going to let this video play. So if you don't have a loft and lie machine, they've now developed this. Oh, sorry, one sec. Let me respond to this message. Can everybody hear what I'm saying? I got one person that's saying they don't have sound.
I can hear.
Okay. So Sue Ellen, it seems like it's just you. So that's one of the latest tools that they came out with, that loft lie meter. So if you don't have a loft and lie machine handy, which most people who use Capto are probably using it outside. If you don't have that loft and lie device handy, you can use this to actually calibrate the loft and lie of the putter, which is a really nice feature that they just came out with that goes along nicely with the calibration bar. So let's go ahead and jump over to Capto here. Let's go to this. Okay, so just kind of building on the updates here. So one of the updates was the ability to view it in player view. So if you go into settings, right here you have player view in graphs. This is normally what it looked like, where it would show it kind of as the person putting from like left to right. So the player view can kind of simplify it for some people. Now you're viewing it as if you were looking down at the putter. So that's one small thing they did. The delta that they changed, let me pull it up again. So the delta angles, so it's within this angles graph. Okay, so if I go into the angle graph, this is normally what it used to show. So it's just another way of looking at the face, shaft, and lie. And it just combines all three of those graphs into one, so you can see the relationship of everything throughout the entire stroke. But now if you show the deltas, the differences from the ideal, it's actually going to show you what the putter is doing relative to what Capto would consider the ideal. And so this leads nicely into understanding the sweet spot plane. And so the sweet spot plane, if we go to the 3D, we'll just use this putt as an example. Actually, let's go to the screen. Okay, so here's a good one here. So the sweet spot plane, the best way to think of it is they are taking the theoretical sweet spot of the putter, which is kind of that area. You can assume that it's the middle of the putter. It's not always the case, but we can have that conversation later. So the sweet spot of the putter, and they're measuring how that sweet spot is traveling. They're only taking into account one part of the putter. So they are basing it on what Luca has called the rotational putt hypothesis, which is understanding that the body, all the joints within the body are rotational joints. So the simplest way to make a repeatable stroke is to minimize the amount of joints are needed. And the fewer joints that are needed will result in a more repeatable stroke. So anybody that is producing a stroke with some sort of translation, so a linear movement, the translation is ultimately a complex series of rotational movements. So multiple joints are having multiple joints are being used to create that translation. So the easiest way to think about the sweet spot plane, let me jump back to my other screen here. So if we look at this circle here, imagine this is a wheel on a car. The sweet spot plane would be measuring the center of this wheel. So as this wheel is traveling from point A to point B, it is staying at a constant velocity, moving in a linear fashion. But if we were to measure any other area of this wheel kind of along this axis, it's going to be rotating and accelerating at different velocities at any given time and at any given point. So the sweet spot plane is essentially taking the putter and it's saying this is what would be considered geometrically congruent. So this is if basically face to path would be 0 with the 3D plane of the putt. So as that putter's moving on the arc, the face, the lie, the amount of change in loft, all that is staying perfectly congruent to the plane that the putter is moving on. Whereas the putt plane is taking into consideration all 3 axes of rotation. So you have the face rotation, if the putter is opening or closing, is going to change that plane. If the loft is changing, if you're adding loft or delofting, as well as the lie of the putter, if it's going more toe down or toe up. So if we go back to the 3D window here, and we look at this, so as we bring up the putt plane alongside the sweet spot plane, you're going to notice that the putt plane is below the sweet spot plane. So that means that there is a difference from what the player is actually doing to what they should be doing theoretically. So if if they had absolute perfect rotation relative to the arc that they were moving the putter on, yeah, there's my mouse. If they had perfect rotation relative to the arc that the putter is moving on, then it would follow this red circle here. But because it's not, because the putt plane is actually below it, that tells me that the putter is actually open or opening relative to the plane. So then when we go back and look at it and we look at face to path, we can see the face to path is open. So this entire stroke, if you look at this bottom number here, current, this player's putter is open relative to the path throughout the entire stroke. So let's see. So the nice thing about understanding the sweet spot plane is it really can just help you diagnose what the player is doing when they're actually putting relative to that sweet spot. And so the way to think about the sweet spot again is imagine, it's just another analogy, imagine that you have a metal ball on the end of a string, and as you're moving that string, it's just tracking where that whole object is moving, that center of the object. It's not actually measuring how that object is rotating around the arc. So the sweet spot plane is just taking that, if the face was square, if everything was perfect relative to this arc, this would be what the stroke should look like, versus the putt plane is taking into account those 3 other areas of rotation or axes of rotation. So the kernel, we'll get into the kernel now. Let's go with putt kernel. Okay, and let's get rid of this guy just so we can see it. So the kernel is the axis or the center of rotation. It is the radius of which this arc is rotating around. It's important to understand that the kernel is only being measured an inch before low point and an inch after low point. So you'll see these dots, if I zoom in here, you'll see them start to move as I would be an inch before low point and then an inch after low point. So they do that to make sure that you can get consistent data regardless of the length of stroke. So it's always going to be an inch below low point and an inch after low point is when that's going to be measured. And it's just taking into account how that putter is frame by frame. If you have it set to 300 frames per second or 400 frames per second, it's measuring at 300 frames per second where that putter is rotating, the axis of which it's rotating about at any given moment. So the larger, to answer your question, the larger the kernel, the more variance there is in the stroke. So somebody that has more kind of what Luca would call that, that rotational putt hypothesis, where the putter is rotating about where the putter is square to the plane, whether it's the lie, loft, or the face opening and closing, then that would be a much smaller circle. So the smaller the kernel, the better. So let's see if I can show you one that has a lot of movement. Let's go to, okay, this is a junior golfer, so this one I would expect. That one's actually pretty good there. Okay, there we go. So you can see how large this one is. Let's get the body there so you can see. So you can see too where this putter is rotating about. So this putter is rotating about an area that is actually really low to the player. So instead of what you'd see with good players where they're typically using kind of their torso in the rotation or to create the stroke, this player is using a lot of hands and wrists. So that putter is rotating about an axis, and you can see how it is changing that inch below low point and that inch after low point as this player is rotating the putter about many different arcs or different points. So imagine just a laser pointer coming from the end of the shaft, and wherever that is pointing, it's taking that picture, and that's what's creating that kernel. Okay, the putter rail, let's look at that for a second. Okay, so if we were to be looking at this stroke here. So we have the top of the shaft path, which has been something that I'm sure everybody's relatively familiar with. That's just showing you how the handle is traveling, and you can view it from any direction. And then we also have the one on the bottom here showing where that putter is moving as well. So the putter rail, or the ideal rail in the 3D motion, is going to actually show you, so we can now see we have a second top of grip rail, and then we also have a second one down here on the ground. So this is based off of, you can see that there. This is based off of that SweetSpot plane as well. So if you were following this ideal SweetSpot plane and the rotation was ideal, then the player's putter would match that ideal rail. So let's go ahead and look at that. One nice thing too that you can do, so you can view the stroke obviously and see what the player is currently doing. You can actually go follow the ideal rail, and you can show the student the difference in how that putter looks throughout the entire movement, which I think is a pretty nice visual for students to better understand and conceptualize what it is that you want them to do. So yeah, the ideal rail gives you that ideal trajectory for the sweet spot and the top of the shaft. So again, the sweet spot, imagine that you have a metal ball tied to a piece of string, and as you're moving or rotating that ball on an axis, it's only taking into account the middle. So it's that image or visual we used of the tire rotating. It's the middle of that tire, how it's moving. It's not taking into account any of the other rotations that are occurring. What was the other one? We looked at live, player view, loft delta, shape quality. Yes, one of the other nice features that they added. That's good. So they gave a shape quality. So they've always had a quality score for the acceleration. So the closer to 1, the better, the closer that is to ideal. They now have that for face as well. So you can go shape quality and they'll give you the score here. So it's going to score that. The closer that the player's actual stroke, so the blue line here, the closer that is to this optimal, the higher the score. And then it also gives you the max difference. So the max difference for this given player was 4.5 degrees, which happened right about there, as you can see up here. So they have that for face. They have that for They have that for face, they have that for shaft, and they also have that for lie. One other small thing to note, they did make a small change to the custom mode. In custom mode, you can now actually add up to 9 data tiles. You can now add up to 9 data tiles, which is nice. And let's see, what other ones do we have? Perfect. One other one in the protocol mode. If you haven't messed around with the protocol stuff, I highly suggest you do. Protocol, this allows you to create, say, an assessment or a test, whatever the case might be for a student, and you can have them go through this, and you can set up hole by hole, the distance of the hole, how much break it has, all that stuff, and the player goes through it, you enter in the data, and it'll spit out a report with all the stroke information, so you can get a little bit more context to what the player's doing. They also now have a leaderboard to it as well. So you can actually turn it into a challenge with your students and have them go through these challenges or these protocols, and they can see how they start to climb up this leaderboard, which I think is a great added feature that they've now launched in this latest release. Let me pull up the chat. Lost my chat. There we go. Dave, did that answer your question about Kernel? Or do I need to go a little bit deeper into that? Yeah, perfect. Does anybody else have any other questions before I jump into the next piece? I'll just leave that there and let people slowly type away. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them. If I don't respond to them right now, I'll respond to them in maybe one of the future webinars. So the putter rail, they also have now as a data tile here. So when you click on the putter rail, you have 3 different ways of looking at it. You can look at it in target direction, so that would be moving kind of in that direction towards or away from the hole. The front direction, so that would be looking at the putter, how it's moving closer or further away from the individual, and then up, so the vertical if it's moving up or down. And so as you scroll through these, let's go to target direction, you're going to notice that there are 2 different colors. And so the blue line here is representing the sweet spot of the putter and the difference that that has from the ideal, from that from the ideal basically sweet spot travel that they would suggest. And then you have the top of the shaft as well. So they have the little visual on the bottom of the right of the screen as well. So the further you get from that ideal, the larger the arrow becomes. So if you look at this one, you'll see that this player, they don't move the rail or the top of the shaft, the grip, too far off of line, but the putter head is moving a lot. So that would suggest that they're de-lofting it quite a bit. So if we go ahead and we look through the stroke, we can see that they're de-lofting the putter about, let's see, at the top 11.7 degrees. And if you look at that relative to the arc, you can see that it is on the high end, so that it's 3 degrees, 3.5 degrees, looks like that might be about the max, 3.5 degrees relative to the ideal arc. So it's another way to kind of help guide you in your decision making and what you're looking at while helping a student. And it's the same thing from the front direction. Are they moving this putter towards or away from them in the extremes? And same with up. Are they lifting or raising this putter to an extreme? You can see how in this one the putter grip kind of goes down a little bit, which again goes with the fact that the putter head is de-lofting a little bit too much. One other thing that I will go into, what time is it? Oh, wait, we got a question here. When you personally use the 3D site. Okay, so here's a question. When you personally use the 3D section, are there certain items that you check more than others? Good question, Dave. When I'm looking at 3D, I haven't gotten to mess around with the ideals too much, but I definitely look at I'll definitely look at the top of the shaft, the travel of the handle, and then I'll also look at how that's moving right before impact. So I'll look at the kernels. So I'll look at the putt kernel and the shaft kernel, and then I'll definitely look at putt plane and SweetSpot Plane, because that ultimately just helps. As soon as I see this, I know, okay, there's something. If these two aren't matching, then I know that there's no, something's lacking. There's no geometric congruency between what the player should be doing and what they're actually doing. All right, we've got 10 minutes left here, it says. So that's the main thing. I'll always start by looking at the grip. That's the first thing I always look at. So I usually kind of clear these things out. I'll look at it from face on, and I'll try to get an idea for what the grip's doing. And you know, to me, the hands are obviously going to be well, the hands are controlling the putter. The torso is going to be influencing the hands, and so on and so forth. So I want to know kind of how the handle's moving and the influence that has on the head of the putter. So I always start there, and then the nice thing now is you can actually look at that ideal and compare the two. So that gives you an ideal pretty quickly. Okay, this player, their lie angle is a little bit off at address, so this is what it should look like. So that's kind of a nice feature. I'll definitely use that. And then I definitely look at the sweet spot in the putt plane to get an idea of where I need to look. So for this one, because the putt plane is on the outside of the sweet spot plane, that tells me that this player likely has a shut face to path. So then when I go and look at this, you'll see that yes, the path is definitely shut in the beginning of the stroke, and then it gets really open, and then in the downstroke it's really shut and then pretty square coming into impact. So if we kind of scroll through this, we're going to see how this putt plane is really shifting because there's a lot of issues going on with the face rotation. So then I would want to definitely look at face rotation. You can see how in the beginning of the stroke, the player actually has the putter face too shut, and then they open it excessively. And then right here it is, what, 7.7 degrees open, and then it actually increases, it opens another 0.1 degree in transition. And then as it comes in, you know, they're struggling to close that face in time. So I use the 3D more so to guide me in my decision making as to what I'm going to look at next. Okay, well, if nobody has, yep, no worries, Dave. If anybody has any other questions, we've got about 5 minutes left before we're going to get kicked out of here. I hope that helped explain the difference between SweetSpot Plane and the Putt Plane, because those are two things that you definitely want to utilize. You want to jump in for a second?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing urgent. I just wanted to thank everyone that's attended and just echo the message that we provided last time. You know, primarily we're an education company. We started dealing with Capto because you wanted the ability to use technology in context on the golf course and help people spot their tendencies in the environment where they're going to need their best putting stroke. We produced a couple of blogs, and then it's really the relationship from there has grown. And now we're in a privileged position where we get to provide education primarily, but we also get to sell the units. Anyone that is interested in owning their own unit who has attended this webinar can be given 10% off at the checkout. So it's gltgolfstore.com. Search for Capto, and then when you check out, it's Capto Golf is the code to be given 10% off. So really simple. There's also a bundle on there that we put together that represents better value for money. And then on top of that, any emails, any questions, you can reach out to Eric if it's regarding the unit. If there's any questions about sales, you can reach out to myself. ihighfield@gltgolf.com, azygle@gltgolf.com. And then if anyone is also interested in maybe even becoming a reseller of the unit themselves, delivering education or writing some blogs for us to put out there, sharing success stories, videoing themselves using the device, we'll put the content out there if the content is of a certain standard, and push the golf industry forward. So we want to help PGA professionals save money. We want to help PGA professionals be more effective coaches. So any questions, just give us a shout.
Yeah, and if you already have a Capto unit and you want to get your hands on either the calibration bar or the Loft and Lie meter that they just came out with, make sure to reach out. We can definitely get everybody.
And those codes will be valid on those articles, I believe, as well. So you can get 10% off.
Beautiful. So take advantage of that. That definitely simplifies the process in setting it up. Okay, sorry, I have one more question here that I want to answer. They've asked, have you seen any changes in handling and trembling based on grip size or type? Show colors, 0, SweetSpot Plane. Yeah, so I have seen a difference in grip size more so. I've had players who are using mainly the large fat grips, and I'll tend to see handling or trembling go up a little bit. And that's more so from the conversations I've had with some people, that's more so because of the amount of rubber in the grip, especially if their accelerations are a little bit funky. There's a little bit more give in the handle just because of how much rubber there is up there. So you'll see a little bit of twisting and trembling going on in the grip itself just because of how much rubber there is versus using something much smaller like an axe handle or a pistol grip. So I have had players who use a big grip and then I put them into something smaller and I see big changes in the handling and trembling, which is a good thing to notice, or something to definitely mess around with. Cool. Well, if anybody else has any questions, you guys have my email. Let me shoot it back to that screen. So if anybody has any further questions, feel free to email me again. Ian just said this, my email, azygle@gltgolf.com, and my phone number is on there as well. Feel free to reach out. More than happy to jump on a phone call. We enjoy, or I enjoy speaking with people about this and learning just as much from you guys as hopefully you are from ourselves. So anybody that wants to get on a call or share some text messages or an email back and forth, whatever it is, I'm more than happy to do so. Thanks for stopping by. Everybody have a good rest of their day. Enjoy the week. Thanks.